Good evening. We will call to order this informational meeting of the Mishawaka Common Council. And this evening, we're going to be hearing some information and presentation from the administration and their consultants with regard to some proposed increases in our electric utility rates. Before we dive into the proceeding this evening, welcome to everybody who is physically present this evening. If you would, please take a moment to check your cell phone to make sure that you have placed it on silent or vibrate. And for those of you participating remotely, we welcome you, and we're going to ask that you mute your microphone until the appropriate point in the proceeding. So with that, unless there are any other preliminary matters from the council, we will turn the floor over to Matt Lunch. Mr. Lunch, the microphone is yours.
All right. President Hicksonball and honorable members of the Common Council, we truly appreciate you being here tonight and understand this is a special meeting, as will be the second reading next Thursday, but are grateful for the extra work that you've put into this and appreciate the meetings that we had. And we've been working at this for almost a year, really looking at the rates and our needs for infrastructure and the cost of power. And you know, the goal that you'll hear over and over, the goal and the purpose of tonight is to explain the what, the why, and how we're going to go about it, or making Mishawaka Utilities Electric Division more sustainable. So, and you'll hear from myself, you'll hear from Sam, from Wolverine. There are a power cooperative out of Cadillac, Michigan, and Sam will be presenting via virtually. So you'll hear him on the phone. Then you'll hear from Baker Tilly, and finally Kevin, who's our electric division manager. So first, I just want to start off by saying that the city of Mishawaka takes pride in providing essential services to its residents, and the Mishawaka Utilities Electric Department plays a crucial role in delivering reliable electric energy to our community and its surrounding areas. It is with a sense of responsibility and foresight that I bring to your attention the need for adjustments to our existing rates and charges. The current rates have served us well, but recent developments necessitate a reevaluation to ensure the sustained efficiency and viability of our electric utility. Some of the factors are inflationary environment. Since 2020, we have witnessed significant inflation resulting in dramatic increase in capital assets, such as much as 300, 400%, and most notably our transformers. Transformers that used to cost maybe $15,000 now cost $50,000. Those that cost $75,000 are costing $300,000 to $400,000. So inflationary, hyperinflation, and it could take us up to what we could get in 6 weeks to 12 weeks now takes 50 weeks, or sometimes up to 3 years or more. The second factor is external energy market dynamics. So external forces, including shifts towards renewable energy sources and changes in fossil fuel availability, are driving up energy costs. Negotiations and anticipated increase in our energy costs through 2030, particularly in our Wolverine contract, demand proactive measures to maintain financial sustainability. Financial planning and stability is a key factor as well. Implementing a multi-year rate allows us to negotiate and address future financial needs methodically. So we really don't want to get into a position where we have to go to the market. The market fluctuates from, it could be at its peak in December when it's coldest, or January. It could be upwards of thousands of dollars for a megawatt. I mean, and up or down to 49. If we were to purchase power for Mishawaka today in an open market, in today's world, it would cost us about $49, and we're currently paying $31. So we have a good relationship with Wolverine. It served us well, and yeah, we are a nonprofit utility. We don't have stakeholders. Our shareholders are our ratepayers, and we need to make sure that we are sustainable for years to come. And lastly, infrastructure investments. Our proposed rate adjustments will enable critical investments in infrastructure upgrades, such as our 4 kV to 12 kV conversion, which is essentially 1950s technology in about 5/7 of the city. We've already converted 2/7 of the city, and the replacement of outdated infrastructure, totaling nearly $11 million and $6.7 million per year, respectively. In light of these considerations, we have developed a comprehensive rate plan designed to balance the needs of our utility with the financial well-being of our ratepayers. This plan aims to provide predictable, modest annual increases while ensuring the continued delivery of reliable electric services to our community. And just one thing to note, as I said that, last year, Kevin, we had, for the whole year, 15 hours of outages for the whole year. That is, if you look at the utilities just that are surrounding us or throughout the state, there are many folks that we know that live outside of Mishawaka, that when their power goes out, it stays out for hours or days. And we measure it in terms of minutes of how long the outage is. And we have Kevin, our electric manager, Mishawaka Utilities electric manager, and his staff have done just a remarkable job of making sure that our grid is safe, secure, viable, sustainable, but we want to make sure it stays that way. But please know that Mishawaka Utilities is committed to responsible financial management and long-term sustainability of our electric utility. The recently proposed ordinance will enable us to meet the evolving needs for years to come. With that, I'm going to move on to a few slides. The slide that you have up is, I call this, not affectionately, but as sort of the fiscal cliff. What would happen if we did nothing and waited till 2030? And the graph on the right shows the high probability impact of energy costs if nothing is done between now and 2030. At a conservative comparison, if nothing is done between 2024 and 2030, Mishawaka residents are likely to see a 34% increase in their rates in 1 year. And we just don't think that's responsible or the best thing that we can do. I will say, I have sat in the chairs that you all, not the very chairs, but I was on the city council back in 1999. And the first vote that I took, the first vote that I had to participate in was a 20% increase in water rates. And I looked at that. I met with Bill Pemberton at the time, and the reality is we had to pass that. I voted yes. So I know this is a heavy lift. I know nobody likes to see the rates go up, but we would not be being honest if we didn't bring forth a really robust, sustainable plan to you as we are today. So if you can go to the second slide, or second slide is this. So we think this is the most responsible thing to do, and that shows really a smoothing of instead of a fiscal cliff, we have rates that go up a bit over time to make up for that over 6 years. And we think that this is the most responsible way to go. And I will note, if you look at that graph, in 2021 and 22, there were 7% decreases each year. So even with the increases, we will not get back to paying 2020 rates until 2028. We will not get back with this rate increase. We will not be getting back to what we paid in 2020 until 2028. I think that's pretty remarkable. And again, the last adjustment that was made in rates was 21 and 22, but the total of that was 24%. The last time that that Mishawaka Utilities Electric Division raised rates was 2014. That was a 21.5% increase. And that's, from my perspective, where we do not want to go. We don't want to put that over, don't want to be overly burdening our citizens or ratepayers. And we think that the plan before you tonight is a very responsible. And again, why the need to increase? As I said, high inflationary environment, outside forces are raising energy prices. It's a supply and demand thing. There's a lot more demand for smaller supply, and that is causing the prices to go up significantly. So we, as I said before, we gave 14% rate relief in 2021 and 22. But as I said before too, proposed rate plan rolls back the rate relief. And again, folks here won't see that significant or that increase beyond 2020 until 2028. And if you look at the next slide, yeah, we talked about the higher inflationary rates. And this is the last slide that I'll present. And then hopefully Sam is on the line and I'll turn it over to him. This slide represents what we think is the gradual increase over a 6-year period with a responsible rate plan. I don't think it would be in our city's best interest or our ratepayers' best interest if we wait and try to game the market or to ride the market. We think that locking in a $50 rate and increasing rates over time is the way to go. So annual rate increases would start in January of 2025, going through 2030. Rate escalation years between 25 through 2030 will enable the application of proceeds to allow our fixed energy costs for 2030 through 2035 and ultimately create the ability to better forecast future financial needs over the preceding 10 years. And as I mentioned before too, it eliminates market volatility in years 2030 through 2035 in a liquid PJM market. With that, I'll take questions.
Thank you. Mrs. Volker.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I need to understand something, though. And I might be ahead, my question might be ahead, but if you look at this slide and you see that in 2030, we're paying an average residential bill is $135.15 a month, but there's a big gap between what we would be paying in 2030 and what the market rate is in 2030. And I'm concerned, and I want to make sure I understand, are you saying then from 2030 to 2035, there will be no rate increases?
If what we're saying is that's what we're hoping to do here.
But so when we say we're hoping to do that, are we committing to do that or are we hoping to do that? Because I envision us being back here in 2028.
Well, that's.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, if the council so approves this rate plan, and we sign an extension with Wolverine, we will lock in the price.
To 2030.
To 2030, it actually goes to 2030, 2035?
2030 to 2035.
So
To 2035,
so
yes.
the rate that we're talking about right now, so this final 135.15 a month for an average is going to lock in then until 2035.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this, and we have a great relationship with Wolverine, and we're able, because of the relationship and what we're proposing, is we're going to lock in that rate and for the purchase of power. It doesn't mean that, so the price of power, which is the cost of power, which is 80% of the rate, right? We can have that locked in until 2035. I think that's the most responsible thing that we can do. There's still some other infrastructure things, but we've built in a 10-year plan. So if all things are equal and there's no unfunded mandates or other things that we don't know of, this should be the rate.
So no increases from 2030 to 2035?
Yes.
Why don't you just do the rate increases from 2025 to 2035? Instead of, you know what I mean? Instead of doing them between now and 2030, why don't you smooth it out to 2035?
Well, in order for us to lock in the rate, we have to commit to Wolverine over these next 6 years to get the rate, to lock it in. That's the reason why.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Violi?
So they wouldn't give us a 10-year?
No.
And
No.
you're saying that in 2030, we're not going to see a 34% increase?
No, not if we do it this way.
plan?
If we do it the way,
So we're
the
gonna
gradual
raise-
increase of 3.75, which is, go ahead.
Which is 22.5% over 6 years, basically.
That is.
And you're saying once we get to 2030, we're going to just maybe at the most have to make up 12%, or we're going to stay, we're not going to have any?
In terms of the purchase of power, we shouldn't have to raise the rates, or, you know, and we have a good infrastructure plan. Again, the purchase of power is about 80%, correct?
About 80%, yeah, maybe just to qualify, as Matt was pointing out.
Gentlemen, I want to stop you.
Sorry about that.
No,
I'm-
it makes it difficult for people to be able to follow along if we
All
have a
right.
lot of chatter from the audience.
That's okay.
So let's finish with Mr. Lunch, and if you
Yeah.
want to add to the presentation later, you
Yeah, my apologies.
No, it's fine. So,
And-
what you're just, what Councilman Volker asked is what you're saying, there will be no increase in 2030 if we do this plan?
If we do this plan, yeah, you know, the only thing that would be.
Yeah, I know. There's always
Yeah,
something that could
there's
happen.
always something that
Of
can happen.
course,
That's
of course.
why-
Sure, sure.
But
Right.
in terms of purchase of power, if we lock in this rate plan and do what we're talking about with the gradual increase, we will not be paying any more than $50. And our ratepayers will be locked into this rate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Hahn?
Has the utilities as a department done anything? I know you said you've been working on this for over a year. Have you done anything internally to reduce any operating costs or anything to save money in other avenues before you landed on 100% having to increase rates?
Yeah, so I would say our operations and throughout our utilities are very lean. And 80%, as I've said before, about 80% of what the purchase, of what the rate is the purchase of power. So the 20% is infrastructure and the day-to-day operations. So I would say that we are very lean. We're a nonprofit utility. We do not have stakeholders. We have stakeholders, but we don't, you know, we are not A&M or I&M, AEP. We don't have shareholders, we have stakeholders. And stakeholders are the ratepayers. So we run very lean. But yes, we looked at everything.
Mr. Violi?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask, but since Mr. Lynch is up there, up here, I should say, let's put the rates aside for a minute. I'm asking for myself as a new person. Maybe Lacey and Kate or Luann are also interested. Walk me through this process. So there's a utility board that suggests this rate increase, correct?
The utility board didn't suggest it. Kevin and I, working
Sure.
with Baker and Tilly and folks, we did a rate study. We started looking at the financial statements, and the financial statements, especially related to Mishawaka-Electric, were very, margins were thin. Now they're non-existent. It would be irresponsible from a management perspective
Right.
to say, do nothing. We had to do something, and this is the most responsible
No,
way
I'm
to-
more interested
yeah.
in the process.
Oh, so the process
No,
was, we looked from the
You come
time,
up with a plan, and then the utility board approves it or recommends the plan that you've come up with.
Well,
I'm
we
just,
went
like I
to
said,
the- yes.
I'm new to this, so I just want to
no,
follow the
no,
process.
that's fine. So there was about a year of working internally, and part of that was once we really discovered where the rates were going to be and what we need to do with the infrastructure, and that was about a 9-month to a year process.
Sure.
We had Baker Tilly do the rate study and the analysis, and And then we worked with Wolverine to work out, to negotiate the best possible amendment to the contract that we could to lock in a price. And then we went before the utility board. And they have contingently approved the amendment to the contract based upon, but it's contingent upon whether or not the rate plan gets approved.
So it goes to the board.
It already has.
It already has, and the council now, we have the power, or it's our responsibility to either, we can raise or lower the rates, but it has to go through the city council to get a final approval, correct?
Yes.
And I'm not, like I said, I just want to just clear it up in my mind, please. But the utility budget is not part of the city budget that I'm going to be sitting on later this year. It's not part of the budget that the city council approves. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is approved by the utility board, and it doesn't come to.
It doesn't come to the city council.
council.
The only time the city council is going to get something about utilities is a rate increase or a rate decrease like it was a few years ago, correct? That's
Yes,
what-
however, I mean, I believe that you all representatives are invited into the budgetary process, if I remember right.
Okay.
Both for all three of our utilities.
But we don't have, the city council doesn't have a member on the utility board. It's. And
Not
I'm
at this
just, like I
time,
said,
no.
I'm just trying to think this through is my problem, not my problem. I just don't understand that it sounds like the city council doesn't have a lot to do with coming up with this, but yet here we are, the ones that are going to have to approve or disapprove. And I would just throw this out there that maybe in the future, after this, yes, no, or whatever, maybe we should rethink the role that the city council should play in something like this, other than just being the final stop. That's all. I just want to make sure I understood it, Matt.
I would say, for full transparency, that we've worked over this past 9 months or more to bring this up. We went through a methodical process. We involved Baker and Tilly, and we have consulted with many folks on the council, and we sat down with you all in pairs or one at a time. So
Right. At the end of the process, you met with, and I'm not saying, I just want to make sure I understand how this works, because like I said, I'm new. And I think somebody said I have till the end of June to say that I'm a new guy on the council, so I'm going to utilize that
I understand.
extra month and just play dumb, because I just want to make sure I understand this process and how we get to this point. But that, you've answered my
But
question.
I don't think we've done it in a vacuum without informing and educating. We've done our best to do that.
I would just suggest that at some point, we might want to just look again at how the council should play the part before it gets to this vote.
Understood.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hazen.
So that being said, that's my big question is, for this rate increase to go through, the council has to vote on it, or are you guys just giving us the ability to vote on it?
Oh, no.
I don't quite understand.
No, you have to approve this rate
state-
plan in
How-
order for us to sign the
According-
contract.
According to who? I mean, is it a state, federal, what is the, I don't.
It's
quite
according to ordinance, it's according to how we're set up.
Indiana
We-
law.
Indiana law.
It's a
Yeah.
function of
Okay.
Indiana law. And just for the record, the other action that the council takes and has taken over the course of my career is to improve bond issuance by the Mishawaka Municipal Utilities as well. So if you think back to the bond that was used to finance the remodeling of this building, that also was approved by the council. So it is rate increases, or going back to 2020, decreases that the council votes on. It's the issuance of debt in the form of bonds. We do not have, at this point in time, a vote that we cast over the operational budget that governs what takes place within the utilities in between those other actions. What Mr. Lunch referred to is that it's long been the practice of utilities, to my understanding, when they come to their individual budget meetings, to invite a representative of the council to sit in on those meetings. Kate's participated in the past, if I'm not mistaken. I've participated most recently, but it's information sharing and an opportunity to ask questions. It is not a vote that the council representative casts with regard to that budget. That all takes place at the level of the utility board that consists wholly of appointees of the mayor, who I think by and large do a really good job. But that's the process as such.
But just to reiterate, Councilwoman Hazen, today's information meeting and the second reading next week will be very consequential. Unless the rate plan is approved, we will not sign an amendment to the contract. So
So one
it's
more.
not advisory, it's meaningful. We will not go forward with this plan unless we have your approval.
So my other question is, are we the only entity that has to make this decision? Or does the utility board also, I mean, does it take two boards? Does it just
So-
take, that's my question.
So we initially went to the utility board, and we did a lot of education with them over time as well, but we went to them a couple weeks ago and asked for them to approve the amendment to the contract contingent upon the rate plan being approved by the council. So they voted unanimously to do that, but this contract doesn't go anywhere unless we get the rate plan approved. Mr. Emmons?
Does Wolverine give us a deadline to when the council has to pass this? For
If
this
we
rate
want
go
to
into-
lock in the rates, it's by the end of the month, in May,
End of May,
end of May,
to get this rate.
to get that rate locked in. Just as a point of information, something significant happened a couple weeks ago that made it even more pressing to do what we're asking. And that is, there was a executive order by the federal government through the president who has said that all power plants, mainly the fossil fuel ones, have to reach just about 98% of, taking out the pollution that they would put into the air. So air, ground, wherever. So what that did was further cement the fact that more fossil fuel plants will be taken off the grid more quickly. They have 8 years to be compliant, which is going to force a lot of action by many fossil fuel plants throughout the United States. Our grid is already thin. A lot of the plants, coal, natural gas, are going offline before the renewables are coming online. So the grid, as I can tell you, is really spread thin. And the demand is going up with electric charging stations, data centers, but there's a lot of reasons, including, the demand is high, the supply is getting lower. So this isn't just a whim, it's not a guess. As again, if I went right now to buy electricity, if we didn't get it from Wolverine to the open market, it would cost us about $49. That's $18 for today, and today's money, of what we would have to pay. So I think locking in the price at 50 is the most responsible thing that we can do to make sure we're not trying to ride the market and going up and down with volatility.
Ms. Hahn?
Were there any other companies besides Wolverine that you looked at working with? I know you said you have a good relationship with them and have worked with them
No,
for a while,
we've-
but did you vet any other companies?
We worked with AEP in the past, and they can't even come close to guaranteeing a rate of this size. They could only guarantee what we could do today, which would be about $49. That would be $18 more than we're paying now, all right? They could not lock in the $50 rate. IMPA, Indiana Municipal Power Association, they're about the same. So if we were to buy power on the open market, we would be paying $49 a megawatt. Right, in today's, let alone not locking in. Nobody we talk to would lock it in for this long. And we believe, as we're not just forecasting where the market is today and the cost, and it goes up and down, but we believe that in 2030, it most likely will be at $65 or more, if not higher.
How
So-
is Wolverine able to provide such a better rate than all the other companies?
Well, I'm going to let Sam talk to you a little bit about that, but it's partially economy of scale. They're well diversified, and they are a nonprofit, right? They don't have shareholders that demand a 9% profit. They have stakeholders like us. So that's one of the reasons. So they don't have their shareholders like AEP or other companies that say, you need to make this much profit. They are a nonprofit as we are.
Mr. Violi?
Thank you, Mr. Ixenbaugh. You mentioned AEP and I&M. I believe South Bend's, is it AEP? Do we know what their rate is? I think, is the residential rate, is it 17 cents?
It is. I mean, but so
And I know it's
ours
a
ours is
different-
9 cents.
I understand, yes.
Yeah. So essentially the comparison, if you live in Granger outside of Mishawaka, in Granger or in South Bend, you'll be paying at this time 42% more. And we believe that we have, we do things that they don't as a nonprofit. We do a lot more preventive maintenance. We have duplicative service throughout the city. So the other day when we had a lot of wind and rain, as power got shut off from one feed, we are able to feed it with another feed that goes into that same area.
In those cities that have AEP or I&M, they don't have a say. They just, here's the rate. AEP, pretty
Well,
much. Or,
they do have a
that's the way
say.
it is because they're a for-profit
Well,
entity.
so to speak, people have a say through the IURC,
Okay.
Indiana Utilities Regulation Committee, and Mishawaka Utilities in the past was a part of that. I think the council and administration, in their wisdom, pulled out of that, and I think it's best left for a municipal utility to go in front of its leaders, the utility board, but more importantly, as importantly, our common council.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for Mr. Lynch?
I have one, if I could, Mr. President.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mamalenti.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lynch, for your presentation this evening and a few weeks ago. I found it very informative. And if you had covered this early, I apologize. I'm in some sporadic coverage. Could you explain where we stand currently as a rate ranking in the state of Indiana, and where we will be ranked with the increase?
So Baker and Tilly will go over that with you, but we are the fourth lowest in the state of Indiana. We're well below the state market average, and even after all the increases, 6 years of increase, you have to understand that everybody's going to go up. When AEP, I&M, same company, they have an increase or a for-profit, their rates have gone up at a pace of like 9% every couple years. We're talking, again, we haven't raised our rates since 2014. As a matter of fact, as I said before, we've decreased our rates by 14%. So we've had a net increase from 2014 to now of 7.5%. The last time AEP raised their rates, it was a one-year increase of 9%. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does, and I appreciate that. And, selling commodities, I understand how difficult it is to lock in a rate that we've been offered for the length of time. So appreciate all the lead work on all parts.
Mr. Ixenbaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mamalenti. Mr. Violi?
One more question, I'm sorry. You say we're the fourth lowest in the state. Is that just with cities that own their own utilities, or is that everything?
All.
Okay, thank you. All right.
All utilities, all electric utilities.
All electric utilities.
Yes. And the last thing I'm going to say, unless there's any more questions, I'm going to invite Maddie, our intern who's working with me, so pray for her for the summer. She's going to be a sophomore at IU Bloomington. Is that it really, the approach we're taking is, and that I really ask you to take, is we have to look at every utility, right? There's three pieces to Mishawaka Utilities. We have electric, water, and wastewater. And I know in the past that water was increased and electric went down. It really does not, from my perspective, behoove us to to do that. I will tell you that we have looked at wastewater and water, and we think their rates are solid unless there would be an unfunded mandate over the next several years. So, I mean, but again, there could be a calamity, there could be an act of God, there could be other things, or an act of the federal government that could force us, and one of those cases would be if we had to replace all the lead lines that go up to houses. But, you know, those things are decided by our federal government, and but we're working responsibly, comprehensively to upgrade all of our infrastructure across the city.
Mrs. Volker?
I have a question about the bonds that we issued in 2020, the electric utility bonds. So I know part of that, I'd like to know from that, and this, I'm a little bit confused, and maybe we haven't gotten here yet again, but in 2020, I believe, we issued bonds through the electric utility, and if I recall correctly, those bonds, or at least a portion of that, was going to be used to upgrade the grid.
Yes.
So were we able to upgrade the 2/7 of the grid?
Yes.
From that bond?
Yes, $10 million.
Okay. So
There's
then-
like 275,000 left currently, but we had to spend it within a certain amount of time. That was part of the bond covenant, as I understand it, and we've upgraded 2/7 of it. So we have a ways to go, but we have utilized just about, 95 or greater % of the dollars, and we will use it in the time to further upgrade.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So the bonds that were issued to upgrade 2 out of 7, and we've completed or have almost completed that.
A portion of the bonds,
Right, a portion of it.
yes.
Okay, all right.
the $10 million that we bonded for the upgrade of infrastructure has been nearly all spent
Okay.
towards the upgrade of infrastructure as we promised.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll
Other
close
questions? And Mr. Lynch, before you turn the microphone over, first of all, thank you for the work that you've done on compiling this information in your presentation tonight, and I appreciate the work of Mr. Rosmer as well. I'll add that I continue to believe that our municipally owned utilities are one of the best things that we have going on in Mishawaka. And if you don't believe me, I'd encourage anybody who has a friend or a relative who lives outside of our service area about those 15 hours of disruption that you cited for last year, and ask them to compare what they experienced. And that's a credit to everybody associated with MMU, particularly Mr. Wasmer and his staff when we're talking about electric service. I'll also go on record as saying that I think that it's irrefutable that the relationship with Wolverine has been anything less than in the best interest of the community. I think to this point in time, it has definitely paid dividends, and the administration and the leadership of the Utilities Department is to be congratulated for having the foresight to take us down that path. There still are a couple things that I want to follow up on with regard to the information that you've shared. First of all, and perhaps Baker and Tilly or someone else can get into the methodology, but with regard to a couple references to that projected 34% increase in 2030, that's not a guarantee, correct?
It's not a guarantee.
That's an educated guess.
A very highly educated guess. I mean, based upon, as I said before, one of the factors is if we wanted to buy power outside of Wolverine today from A&M or IMPA, the rate that they would charge us today would be $49, $18 above what we're paying now. And every forecaster looking is showing that it could, at a conservative rate, be at $65 in 2030, if not higher.
And I would agree. I think it's within our common experience that most things within our personal budget or the city's budget tend to rise over time, so that stands to reason. But I'm hesitant to have us lock into that 34% as being a certitude, because it is not.
It is not.
Right.
Thank you for that clarification. The other, and you've touched on this a couple times, but I really want to make sure that we're crystal clear about the question first posed by Mrs. Volker. So if this plan as proposed is approved, we will lock in the cost of our power purchase
Yes.
through 2035,
Yes, we
correct?
will. Correct.
But, and based upon the sidebar conversation that you had with our friends from Baker Tilly, that's 80% of our
Total cost.
operational cost with regard to delivering electric service.
Yes.
But we can't guarantee that something will happen beyond that 80% that impacts that 20% of what goes into the cost that would force us to have to revisit rates, correct?
Correct. However, we have not just looked at the purchase power, but we've done really, this is not just a rate plan. This is a financial management plan for Mishawaka Electric. So we've looked at our infrastructure, and Kevin in Baker Tilly and our friends in accounting at the city of Mishawaka have helped us as well, is to look at what are our infrastructure needs today, tomorrow, and then as we upgrade. And we think the best way to upgrade is to put it into the rate, because we wouldn't be able to spend $10 million now within 2 years. It would take us probably 5 or 7, because you can't even get the transformers that are 300% or more higher for 4 to 5 years, the infrastructure. So we think this is the most responsible, not to take on more debt, but to handle it in this way.
And I appreciate that. And I just want to be clear, I'm pretty confident that I won't be sitting in this chair in 2035. But whether it's today or in 2035, I don't want somebody to misunderstand that there is being a guarantee that's given either by the administration or the council, our consultants, or anybody out there, that there isn't the possibility of a rate increase as a result of factors that are beyond our control.
That's correct.
And to a certain extent, and I'll ask Sam from Wolverine to address this, we're now, as we sit, are we not, in the midst of an agreement that without an extension would expire in 2030?
We are.
And that agreement, going back to its initial first year, had a guarantee with regard to the cost of the power that we were purchasing, correct?
Yes.
And even though we had a 10-year agreement at a set price for power, now we're being asked to consider a change in what we're paying during the midst of that 10-year agreement. So again, I appreciate what you're saying, and I am not at all implying that you're trying to be misleading, but we have tangible proof, what's before of us, in front of us right now, that we have to be careful about giving out too many guarantees, because we're not in the guarantee
understood.
business. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Lynch?
I do have one more. I'm sorry.
Mrs. Hazen.
So my question is, the proposed increase is 3.75% for the next 5 years or 6 years. How much, what part of that 3.75% each year is planned on the upgrade for the 12 kV?
I'm going to defer that to our
Okay.
Baker and Tilly friends. However,
Okay,
I will
that's
say that 80% of that 3.75% will be the purchase of power. So the remainder will go into the infrastructure.
But it won't be the true purchase power, we're just purchasing for future, we're locking in a rate.
We're locking in a rate. Yes, we
for
are.
Future.
Yeah.
So, okay, so 80% of the 3.75 will be going to Wolverine, and the rest will be going to our municipality for
Infrastructure
the
upgrades.
infrastructure
And
upgrades.
Most notably, 4 kV to 12 kV.
For specifically for the other 5 12 kV.
Yes.
Okay, but, oh, well, but, okay, how are you going to budget that or really put that aside for that when you're telling us that if we had $10 million, we couldn't even?
What I'm saying, if we bonded for $10 million, we couldn't spend it in a couple of years. But we have a graduated plan that Kevin has put together for the replacement of infrastructure, taking into account the hyperinflation of things like transformers and the timing that we would need it. So that's why the best way is not, from my perspective, not taking on additional debt through a bond, but through rates going up, so that it's only coming in to pay for the increased purchase power as well as the infrastructure. So
And what is your plan then for the rest of the 12 KVs, the other 5? How many years do you guys plan on that taking to
And
get
Kevin
done?
will cover that in
Okay.
detail, but it's going to be because the availability of, what we need to do to upgrade, availability of transformers and other things, it'll be 15 years or more.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Lynch? Well, thank you again for your presentation
You bet.
and your patience with us as we asked more than just a few questions, but it's been very helpful.
That's why we're here.
All right.
And with that, I'm going to invite Maddie Mikowski. She is our safety director's daughter, and she's an intern working with me. And she's going to come, and she was going to cover a couple slides, but I inadvertently covered, I think, them all. But I'm going to have her cover the third slide, just for emphasis. But thanks for your patience and understanding.
Thank you.
Good evening. Let me just pull up the slides I'm covering. All right. Good evening, President Hickson-Baugh and the Honorable Mishawaka Common Council members. As Matt said, I'm Maddie Mikowski, and I'm a social media and communications intern for the City of Mishawaka this summer. And I will be presenting on behalf of Matt and Mishawaka Utilities, and I will be covering why there's a need to increase the electric rates. So to start, since 2020, there have been high inflationary rates, and it's been a high inflationary environment, and the assets have increased about 300 to 400%. And outside forces such as the federal government and supply and demand have been raising energy prices, and there's been a reduction in fossil fuels and an increase in renewables, and that will continue to increase as we go on. And back in the beginning of 2020, we gave 14% back, and the proposed rate plan rolls back the rate relief by 2028. And then going back to the next slide that Matt covered, the table demonstrates the gradual increase within the next 6-year period if we implement this plan. And they will increase starting January of 2025 and will continue through 2030. The rate escalation between years 2025 through 2023 will enable the application of proceeds to allow for fixed energy costs for 2023 through 2035, and ultimately create the ability to better forecast future financials over the preceding 10 years. And it eliminates market volatility in the year 2030 through 2035 in a liquid PJM market. So if there's any questions, I will turn it back over to Matt. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Maddie, and
Say one thing.
please.
Thank you. You did a phenomenal job.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Nice
Thank
job.
you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So with that, I will turn it over to Sam from Wolverine. And Sam is attending virtually. He lives up in Cadillac, Michigan. He will be here next week in person, but we wanted him to present the Wolverine plan. Sam.
Thank you all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you, Maddie. That's a hard act to follow. First and foremost, I want to talk about the backdrop between Mishawaka and Wolverine for those who either weren't around in 2018 or simply don't know how the relationship started. So next slide, please. I want to start with a background on who is Wolverine Power Cooperative. We're a nonprofit wholesale generation and transmission cooperative. And what a cooperative means is we're owned by and we serve our customers. So we're owned by several utilities that are not that different from Mishawaka, and we supply power to about a dozen more, and that one of those is Mishawaka. We have about 1,000 megawatts of generation in MISO and PGM. Those might be arbitrary terms for most of you, but those are the power markets that most people exist in the Midwest. Yours happens to be PGM. You can think of them as the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. But you're in PGM, and that's the market that supplies you. We own 16,000 miles of transmission, or 1,600 miles of transmission. Those are the high lines that you typically see outside your city. 7 gas peaking plants, fractional coal ownership, and renewable PPAs. About $1 billion in assets, which seems like a large company, but in the utility business, that makes us a very, very small, nimble power cooperative. We have very good credit. We're A-rated with S&P and Fitch, which means we pay our bills, and we're based in Cadillac, Michigan, a town of about 10,000 people in rural northern Michigan. Next slide, please. And I think I'm going to run through all the slides just because I'm virtual, and then take questions after if that works for everyone, just because I can't see the audience when the slides are up. Our relationship history started really in 2017. One of our owners is nearby Midwest Energy and Communications in Cassopolis, Michigan. Many of their employees actually live and work in Mishawaka, or live in Mishawaka. And we learned that you were seeking a new power supplier after a less than stellar relationship with AEP I&M, and you were in a bidding process that was facilitated by a third party, and the third party was having a hard time drumming up interest in your business. We were called by one of the entities that was vying for your business. They were hoping to sell our generation to you through them, and because of the proximity to Midwest, we decided to pick up the phone and go meet you. We don't do a lot of sales. You're looking at the entire sales force at Wolverine, and I spent my day today out in a hot, sticky field building a solar farm. So this is the entire business origination department right here. We won that kind of auction process by a landslide, and the reality is it's because we own generation in your zone, and because we're a very, very conservative utility that values long-term certainty over profit. So when we build a power plant, we like to know there's an entity like Mishawaka on the other end of the line that needs power for a while. And you will see all sorts of volatile swings in the market, like Matt referenced before. We don't like those swings. We like to just know that we're going to exist 50 years from now, just like we existed 50 years ago. So long story short, we were contracted for Mishawaka's supply in 2018 through 2025. And before we even started in 2019, we extended that through 2030, really because of a similar time like this. There was a lull in the power markets, and it looked like an advantageous time to extend. Your pricing, as Matt alluded to, you pay about $31 for energy and $3.75 for capacity. I'll get into what those things mean in a little bit, but you all have, is there a question? Okay.
No.
You all have a wonderful decision to make ahead of you. Well, while most utilities are scrambling to figure out how to brace for extremely high power rates, the unfortunate thing for them is most of them are already paying them. As Matt alluded to, if you were to try to procure power today in today's market, it'd be about $50. If you were to try to procure power for 2030 through 2035 today, it'd be about $70. So that's the reality. Energy is a liquid market. Nobody sells it for less than it's worth. The only way Wolverine has any strategic advantage over anything else is if we decide to be conservative and value long-term certainty. So that's just a bit of a snapshot. So next slide, please. So I can't reiterate, Mishawaka has, this relationship we have with Mishawaka is mutually beneficial based on risk avoidance. Mishawaka likes low fixed rates that beat the market and likes to be able to budget in 5 and 10-year chunks. We do like the same thing. We get long-term certainty against our fixed investments. When we build a power plant, it's around at least 30 to 40 years. We like to know that we have customers at the end of that line. Matt was correct in saying, and I get this question a lot, what if we do nothing and nobody wants to supply us in 2030? I want to make sure everyone knows the lights will not shut off in Mishawaka. You will be served by the PGM market. You always have that option. The issue is power prices in the PGM market can go from $0 a megawatt hour to $3,500 a megawatt hour, depending on what's happening. If it's, Winter Storm Elliott, it was $3,500. That was 2 Christmases ago. On a 60-degree fall day, the prices could be next to nothing, and everywhere in between. But most utilities can't operate like that because they need some certainty in order to make their budgets and be able to plan. So I just want to make sure that you all know this isn't a life or death decision. There are options for Mishawaka beyond Wolverine and beyond 2030. Next slide, please. So quick, what goes into your electric bill 101? Matt was addressing some of this. I almost wished I could throw this slide up there beforehand. Easiest way to explain it is in terms of plumbing. So what goes into your electric bill are really 4 things. And the 2 highlighted in orange here are the ones provided by Wolverine. Capacity is like the water tower in a plumbing system. Somewhere, there has to be water elevated above your house in order to create pressure so that when you turn a faucet on, it comes out. That doesn't mean you're using any, but that water tower still exists. That capacity represents our power plants ready to serve you when you want it. The energy piece, which is really the crux of your cost, is the water. That's the water that flows through those pipes. We provide the energy and the capacity, and that gets transformed into your retail electric bill. The 2 other elements of your retail electric bill are PGM transmission, the high lines around your city that deliver the power to you. We don't own those, and neither do you. An entity called AEP owns them, and they get reimbursed by PGM for them, and you pay that cost. The 4th thing is what Matt referred to as the 20%. The fixed costs are the little pipes, the low power lines that are in your city, and you have thousands of them, thousands of lines, thousands of transformers, hundreds of, or probably dozens of substations. All that stuff has costs, and that's what goes into your retail electric bill. Baker Tilly will obviously do a good job explaining how all that breaks down. I think Matt really kind of hit it on the nose. It's about 80% power supply and about 20% what occurs in the city. Next slide. So what happens in 2030? Why are we even here today? It is our duty as your power supplier to let you know what's going on in the future market, and especially the market when your contract ends. And the long and the short of it is energy prices are basically double what you pay today. They're actually a little more than that. This presentation is from March. Since we had this conversation, prices are up almost $15 for that 2030 to 2035 timeframe. And what's driving this? Fundamental changes in how power generation is done. In 2018, the vast majority of your energy came from coal plants and baseload natural gas plants and nuclear plants. In 2030, the majority of your power will come from peaking natural gas plants and renewable energy, and that is more expensive. Aside from that, there is more and more demand for electricity. Data centers, electric vehicles, electric heating, and a myriad of things is creating tremendous demand side pressure on the power markets. So these prices are likely to continue for the foreseeable future. The other issue that you need to pay attention to is capacity. The reason why very few entities were able to provide you power when you were looking for it in 2018 is not very many entities own power plants anymore, and not many of them own them in your market. And even though capacity is a kind of a minuscule piece of your overall price, it is a gating item. You have to own capacity in order to serve anybody. And so you have to own power plants, and there's fewer entities out there that are owning power plants because it's a hard business to do. Next slide. Wolverine is in a strong position to serve you. We have competitive operating power supply assets in your market through 2035. We're risk averse, and the futures market has been at a multi-year low. Matt mentioned that you could buy it for $50 today. When Russia invaded Ukraine 2 years ago, wholesale power prices were in the 90s. So these are very, very volatile markets. Mishawaka is a very valued customer for us. It brings us scale for the future. One of the benefits of being a small utility is that Mishawaka is a very meaningful customer to us. You can do the rough math. You're a 150 megawatt utility. We're about 1,000 megawatt wholesale utility. You're about 15% of our business, and we very much appreciate that business, and we're glad that we can provide you with the rates that Matt, as Matt alluded to, have you in the bottom 4 rates in the state. And then the last thing, which really alludes to the proactive increases that you might be taking on, is we have a balance sheet that can smooth the transition for you. Smoothing, I want to be clear, Smoothing is simply proactively paying more in an effort to pay less later. So instead of paying $31 today and $70 in the future, you're going to gradually walk up to $50 and lock in there. There's no savings there. It's simply allowing you to have incremental steps instead of one giant leap step to plan for. You can smooth in any way you want. The plan in front of you elected to have 5 years of smoothing. It could be 1 year. The issue is if you wait and do nothing, you have fewer years to smooth out that giant lumpy transition. Next slide. So your 3 options going forward, you can do nothing. You have a wonderful wholesale price under contract through 2030. We're happy to provide it. We'll continue to provide it. The issue there is you will eventually have to procure power in 2030, and the price is going to be much higher than it is today. You could save money and bet on a recession or some demand side relief. That would be a pretty risky bet. You could wait. Like anything else, timing is a big part of it. You could monitor this stuff for a long time. Then you could try to strike at another time. But the issue there is you potentially lose time to smooth that, and there's no guarantee that there's a Wolverine ready to act when you're ready to act. And then the third option, which is what I'd recommend and what Matt is recommending today, at least as it relates to wholesale power, is move. Secure long-term supply with time on your side, with time to smooth, and be able to start planning around it. So next slide. I think that wraps it up for me. Yeah, so what we've proposed is roughly a 6 to 7% annual increase through 2030 in your wholesale contract. From the sounds of it, that equates to about a 3 or 4% increase in your retail contract. And all of those proceeds get applied to 2030, so your power is $50 instead of $65 or $70. So it's really using your good news today to buy your future tomorrow. I think that's all I have. Is there another slide there? No. I am willing to take any questions about the wholesale power markets, about our contract, about Wolverine. I am at your disposal. I'm looking forward to being there next week, and I'll take questions now.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? Mr. Violi.
Sam, you said, you made a reference to when Russia invaded the Ukraine. Can you repeat what those rates were and what they were before and after that? I missed that.
So before the invasion of Ukraine, which really was a global natural gas scare, is how that translated to the energy markets. It was about $35 to $45 a megawatt hour. And within 3 months, it was almost $100 a megawatt hour, real time.
Okay, that makes, I heard it the other way around. I said, and I thought you said an invasion lowered the rate, and I said, that can't be right. So that makes more sense, what you said. Okay, thank you.
There was a big natural gas scare, and a big portion of our energy supply comes from natural gas.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Mrs. Volker.
Thank you. Hi, Sam. This is Kate Volker. And again, I may be thinking ahead here, but what happens in 2035? We're going to be at whatever rate we're at, $50, whatever it is, and the actual cost is going to be $75, perhaps. So are we to anticipate a 25% increase in 2035? Let me add, or are you going to come back to Mishawaka in 2030 and propose another smoothing to get us to the $75 rate?
I'll answer it in 2 parts. If I could tell you what power prices were going to be in 2035, I would definitely not be in a sweaty Carhartt shirt right now. I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere in the Caribbean because you simply can't predict that. What I will tell you is if your power supplier is doing their job, I won't tell you when it will be between now and 2035, but it will be a moment like this where we see the futures market softer than it normally is. And then we go up to you and say, this could be a good time to extend. And that's a mutually beneficial timing, because if you put it in our perspective, we own these power plants, and when the market is really, really high, we're more inclined to see what might happen if we took our chances with the market. And when the market starts dropping and we get into a lull, that's when it's actually mutually beneficial to extend. That's where suppliers like us get a little nervous and entities like you say, hey, those prices are starting to look attractive. Now, I know that's hard to understand when you're paying $31 for power and we're talking about 50 or 75, but the reality is I do lots of this stuff. I do not know of any utility in the Midwest that has lower cost wholesale power supply than you all do. Your 5 other member utilities of IMDA, so nearby New Carlisle and others, they all signed the contract at the same time. You guys are doing so well in comparison to the market. It's really about how much of that good news do you want to use to make your future look better.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
It does, but so
Yeah.
I guess.
There's no
but-
calendar invite that goes off on my calendar that says, hey, now it's time to talk to Mishawaka about an extension. It's all driven by what the market's doing. For the same reason, in 2019, we extended a deal that hadn't even started yet, and that's because there was a market dip in that 2025 to 30 futures. And so we came to you and said, hey, this would be a good time to extend for both of us.
So that answers my question, though. We can anticipate as a utility, electric utility, and as a city, that when you see opportunity for us to maintain good rates compared to our cities around us or in the state, that you're going to come back to us.
That's our job. That's our job to do it. And it's a selfish job. We own power plants, and we are looking for willing, good credited, good intended entities like Mishawaka as partners with those power plants. We aren't gamblers. There are financial entities that play these commodity risks all the time. We're conservative and we like certainty. So when we talk to entities like Mishawaka about extensions, it's not because someone's making a commission or because, again, a calendar alert went off. It's because literally there's a market moment to do it. And that market moment really, as it relates to this, was about 3 months ago. And we understand that it takes a long time in a municipal process. We've lost a little ground on that, but we've held the price. I cannot reiterate that June 1 expiration is very firm with Wolverine. The market has creeped up nearly $15 since we've held that price. We usually hold energy prices for all of about 3 hours. We've held this one for 45 days to see through the Mishawaka process.
Thank you. I have one follow-up question. Thank you. My other question is, if I were a new municipality, not me, if there were a new municipality that you were coming to talk to, what would you be offering this same kind of deal, or would your deal be more expensive for somebody that you weren't under contract with now? And if you can answer that question with an idea of what those rates would be for a new client or new customer of yours, I would be interested in that.
If we didn't have 5 years of or 6 years of our existing Mishawaka contract in our future, I would be selling our power for the exact same prices Matt alluded to earlier, $50 to $60, because that's what the market's at, and it's a liquid market. I can't stress that enough. Nobody is going to sell power for less than it's worth. The only way to get cheaper prices is to guarantee certainty for length. So as long as that's working for Mishawaka, that works for Wolverine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Mr. Violi?
Sam, where does Wolverine get their power? Do you guys have nuclear plants, or you buy into that? Can you explain that to me? I'm curious how that works.
We own 7 natural gas peaking plants. We have contracts for a couple hundred megawatts of wind. We have about 50 megawatts of solar, and we have nuclear contracts too. Okay. And we have fractional ownership in 3 coal plants. So those are plants where we're not the entire owner, but we own percentages of them. So that's where our power comes from. It's a really, really diverse mix.
Very diversified, it sounds like.
that's part of why we're a very conservative organization, and we never like all of our eggs in the same basket.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Sam, thank you for your presentation. It was very helpful in your answer to my colleagues' questions. Mrs. Volker actually asked some really good questions that I was planning to ask myself, so I appreciate it. No, I appreciate you doing that. I want to go back to what you said about the impact of June 1st. And just to be clear, June 1st is not a relevant date in terms of our current contract with Wolverine, correct?
No, you're under contract through May 30th, 2030.
Okay. And undoubtedly, you have forgotten more about the volatility of your market than I'll ever know. But I struggle with understanding how that date is any different than the 45 days that we talked about prior to that, and why it is that we're at the point, and some of this is beyond your ability to answer, but I'm struggling with how our next regularly scheduled council meeting would be June 4th. And I'm struggling with why we're put in the predicament now based upon market forces that I don't fully understand to change our normal rhythm and schedule and have to deal with this next Thursday as opposed to a scant few days later. So there's no criticism intended there, but I'm just asking you to try to help me understand, if you can, why it is that that passage of what I would view to be a really short period of time is so critical.
I can answer that. When we approved this offer, it was at our March board meeting, which would have been the last Thursday in March. We generally hold an energy price for a counterparty for about 3 hours, maximum 3 days, because of the volatility in the market. I asked Matt and Kevin for their utility board schedule and their common council schedule to be able to accommodate what is a natural process in a municipality that obviously is going to take longer than 3 hours to 3 days. It was our intention, I believe, to have this on the May 20 docket. And for some reason that didn't come to fruition, Matt, or May 17. And that's where the special meetings came. I was planning on being there last week. And maybe Matt can provide more color. But the June 1 deadline is what we assigned in late March. And our company will be firm on that because, as I alluded to, this offering is already out of the money for us. Again, we're a conservative organization and we think in the long term, but the markets have substantially increased, and it's all because of the EPA ruling that Matt alluded to earlier.
Okay, so to sum up, that's an internal business decision on the part of Wolverine.
It was completely arbitrary at the time, and now it is very, very meaningful. I will not be able to get approval for this offering beyond June 1.
Understood. Well, and then not so much a question as a comment. I want to reiterate my earlier comment. I do believe that the facts support the conclusion that the move to the relationship with Wolverine has been in the best interest of Mishawaka and our ratepayers. And we appreciate the partnership and the work that has been done to this point in time. What happens with regard to the extension remains to be seen, but I think it's fair to acknowledge the good work that you and Wolverine have done on our behalf to this point in time, so I thank you for that.
We value you as customers.
Thank you. Anything else from the council? All right, thank you, Sam.
So if I can, Matt Lynch again, City of Mishawaka, Mishawaka Utilities. It not only the burden or the opportunity and really the mandate is not just of a company like Wolverine, but it lies with Kevin and I and the utility board and with you all to look at the market. So what we have before you is a 6-year far-reaching rate plan, correct? And yep, we're trying to make sure we're managing things in the most fiscally responsible way. I can tell you that there are utilities, municipal utilities or otherwise, that will kick the can down the road because somebody's going to be retired or something else. They don't want to deal with it now. Maybe the term is expiring or they're retiring. We're not going to do that here. We're going to take a proactive approach as we have here. And as Wolverine has come to us, we have been looking at this for 9 months to a year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff from Baker and Tilly.
All right, thank you, Matt. Thank you, members of the council. Good evening. So a lot of what we have to present tonight is probably repetitive of what we've kind of covered in the past and what we've covered already tonight. So I'm going to try to be brief and avoid repeating a lot of what has already been covered. So I'll do that, and I also would like to maybe go back to, I kind of jotted down about 3 questions that I want to provide a little more clarification on, if that's okay. So, but again, just as sort of an overview, not sure if I've got the correct slides up or not. Well, all right, we'll just kind of do this verbally then. Again, overarching goal was, and still is, to develop well, first of all, to take a proactive approach versus a...
The cavalry is on its way from our IT
Okay,
department.
I'm probably doing something wrong. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so again, the kind of the overarching goal here for all of the sort of headwinds we've kind of talked about tonight was to take a proactive approach in planning for the future over the next 5 to 10 years versus waiting and taking more of a reactive approach. But at the end of the day, the plan that is the rate plan that's before you this evening for discussion was developed, again, to provide a multi-year rate plan that takes into account not just wholesale power that we've talked about here tonight in depth, but also all of the other costs that are perhaps as equally important to providing sustainable and reliable, affordable service to the residents of the city of Mishawaka. Those things including operation and maintenance costs, so that's the day-to-day cost of the utility to provide service. We've talked a little bit about debt service on the outstanding bonds. It's another component, revenue requirement component of the overall rate. And then also capital replacement costs. And those are the kind of the small utility lines that we talked about earlier, but not small in terms of importance, but fairly significant in terms of dollars. And that kind of brings me to, just kind of wanted to go back to one of the points or discussion points or questions that was earlier, again, to clarify. One of the questions was, how much does the wholesale power cost make up of the entire cost of the utility on an annual basis? And that is, it is correct that it's 80%, but that's 80% of just the day-to-day operating costs. But if you take into account the full cost of service, it's actually 70%. So it costs...
I'm sorry, what was that number?
It's about 70%. So wholesale purchase power on an annual basis is represents about 70% of the overall cost of the utility on an annual basis. So in terms of dollars, the total annual budget is roughly $60 million. And so give or take, $38 million or so represents wholesale power. The balance, or $22 million, so about 30% balance, represents all of the other costs of the utility. So that includes day-to-day operating expenses. That includes debt service on the outstanding bonds, and that also includes asset replacements, which we'll get into a little bit more with Kevin's presentation. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit based on that earlier question. So why are we considering this proactive approach? Again, I'm going to try to avoid repeating here. I'll just kind of hit some of the high points. High inflationary environment, we've talked about that. We've talked about the outside forces. The transition from fossil fuels to renewables is something that's out of the utilities' control, but certainly increasing energy costs. We've talked hear in depth about the Wolverine contract and the planned increases in what the city would pay to Wolverine in planning for the future to lock into a lower cost now that the city will be able to appreciate in 2030, beyond 2030. Rate escalation between years 25 through 2030 will enable the application of proceeds to allow for fixed energy costs. So we kind of talked about that, and I know Sam can, again, speak to that going forward. We talked about the plan, part of the purpose to eliminate market volatility, which this plan helps to do. It was mentioned, I think, at the outset, and I think Matt mentioned, but the decrease in utility rates that occurred back in 2020 that was phased in over a 2-year period. So that was a total decrease of 14%, 7% per year starting in 2021, and then a second 7% in 2022. So part of the increase that we're talking about now is also kind of the rolling off of that rate relief that was put into place. The conversion, continuing the conversion from 4 kV to 12 kV, and I know there was a clarifying question on that, which I'll come back to here in a second. And then finally, the replacement of outdated infrastructure, which goes beyond the 12 kV conversion. There's a lot of other, obviously, needs within the municipal boundaries to continue to replace assets as needed. Real quick, going back, well, on that topic, that amount per year that is being built into the rate plan is about $6.7 million. So we're talking about roughly $40 million over this forecasted period that is being built into the rate, again, to ensure that assets are continuing to be replaced and upgraded as needed. The 12 kV conversion, I know this was a question earlier. What is built into the rate? It's roughly $11 million to continue that conversion over the 6-year period.
Can you repeat that? I got confused because I thought you said it was 40 million over 10 years for the asset upgrades.
Yep. So there's two pieces to the asset replacements. There's the transition to the 12 kV.
Right.
That's one component of it, and that's about $11 million that's built into this rate plan.
Over the next 10 years.
No, over the next 6 years.
So by 2030, 11 million is going to be spent on upgrades, and where does that get us? To 3/7, 4/7, 5/7?
Good question for Kevin. I'll have to defer to Kevin on that one. But yeah, $11 million over the next 6 years to be built in. In addition to that, there's an additional $40 million, roughly, $6.7 million per year, that is going towards other capital asset replacement needs of the electric utility. So there was a question earlier, I think, that was asked about how much of the 3.75% increase per year relates to the conversion to the 12 kV. It's not in this summary here, but if you have, not going to go through the detailed report, but within the detailed report, the rate study report that we prepared, on page 11, there's actually, down towards the bottom, there's actually a breakdown of how much makes up the 3.75% in terms of the various cost components. It varies year from year, so I'm going to use some general numbers here. But of the 3.75%, roughly 17% of the increase relates to just general increases in operation and maintenance costs. Roughly 60% represents the projected increases in wholesale power with the Wolverine contract. And then roughly 30% of the 3.75% relates to funds going towards these capital asset replacements, which includes the $11 million 12 kV conversion. So it's not the full 30%. If we look at the actual dollars that are being spent in a particular year, it relates, or it translates into about 7.5% of the increase per year relates to that 12 kV conversion, roughly. Back in the napkin calculation here tonight. So, but hopefully that sheds a little bit more light on a couple of those questions. There was one other question too, I just kind of wanted to briefly touch on, and that was to the question pertaining to what's the city council or the common council's responsibility for adoption of rates. I think that's been covered. That state statute requires approval, and there is a process, statutory process that we're following that requires approval by common council. But I think there is also maybe a side point about having some updates or involvement on how the utility is performing on a recurring basis beyond just the approval of the budget. And something that Matt Utility Board entered into a contract, I believe it was earlier this year, with us, Baker Tilly, to provide what we call a financial management report for the utility. And really the purpose of that report, it's a recurring report, happens at the beginning of each year, but it's a look back at the previous year's performance. And so that will be something on a going forward basis that will be provided to the electric utility, and certainly would be made available to the common council, but that helps provide some transparency, if you will, with regard to how the utility will continue to perform, on an annual basis going forward. So we'll just scroll down here. Okay. So we'll just touch very briefly, and I don't see it on here, but it might be user error on scrolling down a little bit further. Have the handouts? Okay. All right. Thank you, Matt. So at the bottom of the page 1, we show the average monthly impact to what we would just consider to be an average residential user, which uses, and this is sort of just an accepted average usage throughout the state, but we've assumed 1,000 kilowatt hours is an average residential. So you can kind of see there what the projected rates will be. Current rate, $108.25, and that goes up by 3.75% per year. So with compounding, that ends up being about $4.50 increase to the monthly bill each year as the rate plan is played out. The one thing I also want to mention, and I think this has maybe been discussed previously, but there is that energy, that pass-through component of the rate that is currently in place, which is at 0.0132. And that has always been in place to help take into account or adjust for those changes in energy costs as things change going forward. So what we've proposed is that 0.0132 actually is being rolled into the base rate that you're considering here tonight. So it's not going to go away completely, because we want to preserve the ability for the city to enact that change, that small rate adjustment as needed as things change. But we're setting it at 0.0001, so as close as we can get to zero. But I did want to point that out because that does preserve the city's ability to be flexible with changes in that energy cost component. So I think this has already been covered. This is just the graph, but again, try not to repeat here, but the rate prior to the rate decrease that was in effect, the average user was paying about $123 per month. And then we see that rate decrease in 2021, 2022, which represents the current rate that's in effect at $108.25. And then you can see, if you kind of draw a line across the graph there, with this existing rate plan, we actually don't get to and exceed the pre-2020 rate at $123 until we get out to 2028. And then lastly, this is just a comparison graph that illustrates kind of where the city is compared to some peers, some other communities that provide electric service around the state. This isn't a full comprehensive list of every utility in Indiana. This is sort of peer communities that are in the area and roughly comparable to the city of Mishawaka, and also some that are Wolverine contract customers as well. So as you can see, the city current rate, $108 just over, is at the lower end. If you look at the yellow bar, that represents, I'm sorry, the aqua bar there at $130. That's the statewide average currently. Now, we know that this is always a moving target, so every year municipalities will adjust rates, so we'll see these rates continue to go up as the tide goes up. But right now, the city is well below, and which has been pointed out, is well below the state average, and we actually don't exceed that current state average until we get out to year 2029. But by then, my guess is the state average will be higher as well. So with that, I'll conclude. Hopefully, I've covered most of what needs to be covered here this evening, but happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Violi?
I like to hear gross numbers. So do you know what is our gross revenue from our rate collection? Is it this 55 million that was on that one presentation?
56 million is what the city currently collects from the metered electric rates, so the monthly rates and charges. There are some other revenues that are collected, some miscellaneous revenues, interest income, late fee penalties, those types of things that are in addition. But in terms of the electric rates that we charge retail, it's about 56 million.
56 million.
Mrs. Hazen?
So I have a couple of questions. Looking at the electric budget for 2024, there's already $5,365 planned for capital outlays. And I believe that carries forward pretty similar every year. So now on top of that, we're also going to be budgeting an additional $6.7 million per year for replacement of the outdated infrastructure? Or is
No, that's the same number.
It's going to be
so-
the same, okay,
Yeah, not in
gotcha.
addition, correct.
I was like,
Yep.
okay. So it's just a little bit more. It's going to increase about 1.4 million with the increase.
Right, yeah, and we see, every year, we do see make sure I'm looking at, yes, the capital budget, it does increase. So it ranges over from 2024 to 2030. This is in the detailed report. Annual capital replacement cost range anywhere between 6.9 and, roughly $7.2 million per year.
Okay, so it's not in addition.
Right, correct.
Mr. Violi?
So by the end of this period, 2035, we will roughly raise approximately, $12 million in additional revenue? Is that correct?
Correct. It's, roughly $2.5 million per year over that period.
And you said that 70% of that is going to go to,
So 70% of,
not directly, right?
Let me go back, clarify, because I might have estimated there. The additional revenue that we will collect, the city will collect on an annual basis with the rate plan is roughly, it increases over time because with compounding, it increases. But in 2025, we would see an additional $2.1 million in revenue. By the time we get out to 2030, it'd be about $2.5 million per year. So that's the range of additional revenue that the city would receive each year within the rate plan. So that part of what's driving that need for the additional 2.1 to 2.5 is the increased rates that we'd be locking into with Wolverine, in addition to all the capital needs that we've talked about.
Mrs. Volker.
Thank you. I have a question about the numbers and the full report. I don't have the full report. I don't know if we've ever received the full report, but it would be nice to be able to look at your full report as we analyze this. So, and even to tell you the truth, what we were, your breakdown of the 3.75% is not included in our handout. I do see something that I received online, but I feel like maybe we need to have a little bit, we need to have the equation with the
Sure.
numbers in it. So I would really like to get the full report, if that be possible.
Yeah,
Maybe I already
absolutely.
received it, but,
Yeah, I'd be happy to resend it so that you have that information.
okay,
Yep,
thank you.
Sure.
Well, Jeff, thank you for the information. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I also appreciate the work that Baker Utility has done for us for many years with regard to not just our utilities, but in particular, the operation of our municipal utilities. A couple follow-up questions. With regard to the slide that's on the screen right now, when I look at the far right column, there are a series of communities that have a paren behind them, and it references the name of a power provider. So is it safe for me to assume that those are non-municipally owned utility communities?
Correct.
If it would not be just a pain in the neck homework assignment, I wouldn't mind seeing this graph extended to some other geographically proximate communities. I'd like to see the South Bend and Elkhart rates in particular. And then if there are any other municipally owned utilities that would be another way to analyze the data, I wouldn't mind having us receive that as well.
Sure, yep, be happy to provide that.
I appreciate it. You mentioned earlier the decision that was made by the council several years ago, and I believe Mr. Lunch referenced it as well, for us to opt out of IURC oversight. And my understanding and my recollection of when we used to be subject to IURC oversight was that there was an additional step in the rate setting process, which was after we took local action, then that entity in Indianapolis also had to approve and sign off based upon a case that was presented to them to justify the proposed increase. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. So the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission oversees the approval of rates, water rates and electric rates. So not sewer, wastewater, just water, so commodity-based water and electric service, unless the community opts out. But you are correct in that there is I won't only say just an additional step, but there are a lot of steps to that process. It's very involved process, very costly. But yes, there would be many additional steps if the city hasn't already opted out to go through a rate case before the commission for approval of the rate plan.
And it's my recollection, I wasn't on the council at the time, but it's my recollection that when we opted out of IURC oversight, that there was a commitment made by the council to, as much as practical and possible, to bring to the table the same type of scrutiny that the IURC would bring to proposed rate increases. So my question for you is, I've asked this before, but I think it's important to get it on the record. If we were still subject to IURC oversight, and this proposal that in front of us this evening was approved at the local level, what enhanced evidence, what other information would you have to provide to the IURC in order to feel confident that we were going to be able to receive their approval as well for the rates as are proposed here this evening?
Yeah, so typically the commission, the commission has if you kind of think of it as sort of it's called a rate case, so it has legal binding authority. So you have attorneys involved on both sides. So you'd have attorneys and financial advisors on both sides that are pleading their case. But what we would be responsible as a financial rate consultant to the city is to prepare a rate case that supports the rate plan. And then once that's presented to the commission, sort of overly simplifying here, but they would take that rate plan, they would review it along with their internal rate consultants and attorneys, and they would come back with quite a few back and forth set of questions, requests for data that just basically supports what, type of work that we've already done here, like we have done this evening. And then there's a process by which there are testimonies, there's a rate hearing, and so there's a process of testimony, rebuttal, basically what you'd see in a typical legal case. So it tends to require much more time, at a minimum 6 months, but generally closer to a year to get through that entire process. So I can't necessarily speak, and I know you're not asking exactly specifically what pieces of information, but it's a much more extended process that is really extends the process, extends the overall timetable, and is much more costly to go through that process. But in terms of what, as a rate consultant, what we would go through at the beginning of the process in terms of putting together a rate plan, doing our typical analysis, it's really not any different. So opting out, and maybe this is more commentary, but opting out really puts the decision-making back at the local level for those that are the elected officials that were elected by their constituents versus having to have some sort of state agency oversight that would tell the local community what's best for them. So again, a little bit of commentary there, but at the end of the day, this puts really the decision-making and power back at the local level.
I appreciate the commentary, and I happen to agree with you, which is maybe why I appreciate it. But so based upon your familiarity with that process and the comments that you made, if you step back and look at the information that's in front of the council tonight, is there a significant difference in terms of the quality and the quantity of the information? Clearly, the quantity would be different if we were talking about a more legalistic proceeding rather than what we're engaging in here. But is there a gap in terms of the information, in your professional opinion, that we've been provided that allows us to make the best possible decision we can make on the part of the community?
Yeah, no gap or difference in quality. Quantity, yep, absolutely. There's a difference in terms of quantity, but not quality.
One of the other bits of information that I think is relevant is with regard to the revenue that Mr. Violi and others have talked about. If this plan is approved, let's talk about the cash balances and various funds that would be impacted by this. My layman's non-CPA understanding of the advice that Baker Tilly provides is that you make recommendations with regard to cash balances, reserve amounts in the various funds. Is that accurate?
That's correct. And much of that, part of it's in just best practice industry standards, but it's also driven by the covenants that were established at the time the city went and issued debt. So there are certain bond covenants that really establish and lay out the proper flow of funds within the electric utility, and it establishes certain minimum cash reserve balances within the various funds within the electric utility.
So is it safe for us to assume that if the proposed plan is approved, that we will achieve the goals of meeting the recommended cash balances and also comply with the bond covenants that obligate us to maintain certain reserves and certain funds?
Yeah, that's accurate. That's correct. Yep. So not only comply with the required bond covenants, but also provide sufficient funds to meet any, if there are, and actually I don't believe there are in this case, but sometimes there are self-imposed minimum cash reserve balances if there's a cash management policy that's been adopted. I don't believe there is in this case, but what we do is we use sort of best industry practice to establish what those minimum reserves should be.
You actually somewhat anticipated my next question. So based upon this plan, will we not only meet those recommendations by you and your firm with regard to cash balances and reserves, but will we exceed that in any significant fashion in any of the affected funds?
It's hard to say whether the city, well, let me start. This plan, unless something unusual comes up that came to attention outside of this plan, but the city or the electric utility will maintain and be able to meet those minimum cash reserves and a little bit more. Now, in terms of how much beyond those minimum reserves is really a question of how closely the utility spends according to the spending plan, and so and also timing, because like I said before, we looked at, for example, capital needs. I think we looked at, was it about 6.7 million roughly per year in capital needs on average. There'll be some years, I suspect, that maybe the city spends less than that. There could be years over the next 6 years where they spend a little bit more than that. So there could be some timing differences that affect or impact the cash reserves that are on hand. But on average, over the 6-year period, we would expect that the city will at least meet those minimum reserves and a little bit more than that.
I appreciate your help. Thank you. Any other questions?
I do have one more
Mrs.
question.
Hazen.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. So, I mean, I think we all agree that obviously locking in the Wolverine rate is a great idea. So what would if we didn't take all of the other factors into mind here, what would the rate increase have been over 6 years without everything else? Do you know that? With just the Wolverine rate lock-in?
Yeah, just the Wolverine. So again, we're looking at generating an additional we'll say on average, roughly $2.1, $2.2 million per year. If we were to do nothing, when I say nothing, I mean not have any rate adjustments between now and 2030.
No, I'm saying if we had a rate adjustment every year, but we didn't include the capital outlay and the KV and everything else, if we just wanted to lock in those rates, what would the increase be for our citizens every month? Do we know that? Or every year, excuse me.
Yeah, I don't know that I can give you a number off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to provide that.
If we use the 70%, would it be like $2.60? 70% of 2.6% versus 3.75%? That would cover the 70% increase, or the
Yeah,
70% that we.
Oh, okay, yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I think that'd be a good way to look at it. No, I think that's a good way. Yeah, because roughly 60% of the increase is power.
Right.
60%,
Yeah,
okay.
If I use
so
70,
the
I come up
balance
with-
of the 40%
Got
of
it.
3.75, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense, okay. Thanks, Tony.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate your time.
Likewise.
Evening. Thank you, President Hicksaball and council members. Appreciate you taking the time to meet with us yet again and kind of discuss some of the same information we've talked about before. I'll go through it again and take questions at the end if you have anything, okay? All right, now we've been talking about a lot of dollars and money, and everybody's saying 4 kV, 12 kV. What does 4 kV, 12 kV mean? What does it look like for the city? If I live in the city of Mishawaka and I have your electric, how much electric does it look like on a city map? So we did a few pictures and some information to kind of help out with that. So 4 kV, 10 kV, or 4 kV, 12 kV, the $10 million bond, I think there was a question about that earlier. We did a bond money, it was $10 million. What have we done with the $10 million, right? Everybody wants to know, what have you done with it? So the $10 million kickstarted our original 4K to 12K conversion. With that bond money, we built one new 12 kV substation that will replace 2 of our 7 4 kV substations. It's the old Union substation and a 4th Street substation. So the new one that's built over by the new motor pool off of Church Street is actually replacing 2 substations. It's the one that's right by the bus depot. If anybody's been over there, there's a little underground transformer substation. It looks different than anything else. There's no overhead wires. It's kind of unique to our sub. And then the other one would be the one right by the street out by motor pool. And then the brand new substation's right behind it's kind of the shinier one, if you ever drive by and take a look at it. With that substation being built, we also replaced 427 transformers from the 4 kV to the dual voltage 4K, 12 kV that are now ready for the 12 kV system once all the other substations are ready to click over. In the fourth quarter of 2022, costs for the utilities, big ticket items, such as transformers skyrocketed from 40 to 400%, depending on the size and voltage of the transformers, which I'll have a slide later that'll show you how much the larger transformers went up. It wasn't every single transformer here. It's not catastrophic all the way across the board. So we're just going to show you the ones that actually have the biggest impact. And of course, the 2022, unfortunately, the pricing going up happened to be at the end of our 14% rate reduction that nobody could see was going to happen. So try to do a rate reduction, and then coming out of that was, skyrocketing prices that we've never seen before. So we're trying to adjust to that. Transformer delivery times as well have been pushed out from our normal time, which would be 8 to 12 weeks. We're seeing 48 to 112. Right now, actually, some of those have gone up to 130 because they're still not here yet. We're forced to place larger orders than usual when we can get them, thus driving our yearly inventory cost up as well. Because of the long delivery times, transformer manufacturers have now implemented a maximum order quantity cap per year or simply no quoting due to the large amount of back orders already in-house. Then we'll go to the next. Can you see it up there pretty good? The numbers are kind of small on here to squeeze it all in for everybody so they can see one picture. On the left-hand side, it says transformer KVA. Starts at 112.5, goes all the way up to 2,500 KVA. And then right next to that's going to be groups, group 1, group 2, group 3. Kind of showed what we were paying for them prior to 2022. So if I go all the way to the left, 2020, average transformer cost, 18 from the small up to about 50,000 total. Maybe 65, there's a hidden one in there at 1,500 KVA. So 60,000 or less. Delivery times are great. As you'll see there in the middle, it kind of says 8 to 10 weeks. I'm still under group 1. Right in the middle there says 8 to 10, 16, 10 to 11, 8 to 10 months, not too big of a deal. Move over to group 2 to the right. You'll see order times 2021, 2022, and then one more column over, you'll see the lead times went from the 18 to 24 to 26, 30, 32 looks like the worst case. Prices again kind of holding, are not much higher than what they were the previous year. And then we're really talking about the 2022 up to today's 2024 numbers. I would love to update this and put 2024 numbers on here. We have not ordered any transformers. As I said prior, we've ordered what we can, and right now transformer manufacturers for us, we don't have any orders available at this moment. So there's no updated time. I know these dates look kind of old because they say 10/20/22, but those are actually the dates we ordered them. We have not received these units yet. So that's why they look like they're 2 years old. They're not really 2 years old. That's just the last time we ordered equipment. So on that one, you'll see in the middle, we'll go with the dates. You'll see the delivery times are now 50, 52, 64. So we're looking at like a year and a half if you go all the way down to the larger transformer. And the biggest cost where we say the 40%, the smaller ones, the 400, not to be too dramatic, is going to really cover our 1,000 kVA transformers or larger, which are kind of like what you see out here like at Ironworks and the new living centers where everybody lives up on top and you have all the shopping centers on the bottom. That's the common size transformer for each one of those. Each one of those developments usually take 1 to 2, if not 3 of those. So that's the large cost that we're talking about on the big transformers. I'll go down one more. Next is your smaller transformers. These are your single-phase transformers. These are in your residential areas. You got the 50 kVA that's on the pole everybody sees, or a little green box that says 50 kVA. Sometimes they say 100 in your neighborhoods. Everybody's out by the street or out in the alley if you live where there's an alley. Those costs, again, have gone up. They're 40 to 74%, which doesn't really seem like that's a lot of money. But when you're doing a 4 kV to 12 kV conversion, you're buying 200, 400 transformers at a time. So that does add up when you're multiplying at large numbers. If it was 1 or 2, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. And then a little map here to zoom in to kind of show, here's the Mishawaka. Here's what we have. Mishawaka Utilities power grid. There's the whole city, goes all the way north up to basically 23, south all the way to about Meyer, if you look at the map, east and west. The 12 kV, currently we have 208 miles of 12 kV wire. That's the blue color. Can you see the blue up there? So you can see the blue up there to the north. That's where a lot of the developments happened over the last 15, 20 years. And then if you look to the south, closer to where the Meyer and bypass kind of area is, you see blue again. These are the most common areas in my 26 years I've been here working that we've done a lot of development. Now we're centering in the city. As we look over here to the left, all these new developments down here require more power, more energy, more efficiency. So these are the areas we're looking to upgrade. And if you look just under the chart on the right-hand side, it says 4 kV, which is the green. You know, we still have 166 miles, 4 kV primary that still needs to be upgraded to the 12 kV. Existing 4 kV, 12 kV transformers. Again, these are going to be a bunch of little dots. If I had a bigger picture, I would have thrown it up a little better. Same thing applies here. The blue is going to be your 12 kV. If you look, there's a lot of blue heavy dots going to the north. Same thing to the south. And then the green, again, is in the middle. So we got 1,587 12 kV transformers currently in the city. We've got 1,228 4 kV transformers. And we have upgraded 935 transformers from the 4 kV to the 12 kV, which are the yellow transformers. And just a quick side note on that. So the 4 kV, like we were talking about 30 to 45 years old. Some of them are hitting the 50, 55-year-old mark, transformers. So they're ready to be upgraded. What we buy is dual. So the yellow, we say dual 4K, 12K. We can buy them, install them at 4 kV, do the upgrade to the system, get the new transformers installed at the substation, and then start taking small pieces at a time. And then you take an outage, you click it over, has an internal switch. You can go switch over to 12 kV, and then we'll start switching it over slowly. But you can't really do 2 for 1. So you got to put in a dual voltage transformer because it does dual purpose. It goes in now, and then when we do the conversion, you can click it over versus buying 2 separate transformers, putting it in, and then taking it out. So that's why we call it dual voltage. So the next slide, again, here's the zoom in. Here's where we've been concentrating most of the work. Again, the $10 million we talked about, the new substation, the transformers, up to date from the 2020 4 kV to 12 kV conversion. We've done 427 dual voltage transformers all throughout this zoomed in area, but again, mostly the downtown area. And then the remaining, which is what we're talking about, so the 4 kV, 12 kV, the dollar amounts we've been talking about looks like, if I go back to the notes here, 2.1 million per year increase is what we're looking at, is to take care of what you see left here, about 1,228 transformers. Now, if I could lock in today's price, that'd be easy to say and guarantee we get it done that fast. And we're not that fast, but with that price. So we're judging the 2.1 million based on the 10 million we invested over, we've had 3 years to spend it. So we got it in June of 2021, and we're supposed to have it pretty much all spent by end of June of 2024. So we're really close, like Matt had said earlier. I think we're around $200,000 left. And we gauged the projects, the transformers between how many we can order, when we can order them, how long they take to get here. So the goal was it's about $3 million to $4 million per sub to keep doing. We've got, like we said, we got 5 subs left, but we're dividing that over. So really to look at it, we try to divide that over a 2-year to 3-year period. So we're trying to take $3 million and invest it over 2 years at the substation. That's why it came up to 2.1 million. I mean, it's 1.5 to 2 million, but we tried to stretch it out. We can really spend $4 million a year. That would be really expensive and wouldn't be responsive of myself because I couldn't get the equipment fast enough. So why charge everybody more than what we can spend? And we don't need to spend it if we don't need to spend it. So we're trying to do it. What can we do now and how fast can we do it and not increase rates too high? Traditional 4 kV distribution circuits are becoming obsolete due to the expansion of utility networks and the ever-increasing demand for electrical power. Increasing the length of lines into our outlying areas adds both load and circuit impedance, thereby greatly increases line loss and voltage drops. Most of our 4 kV equipment has reached or exceeded its design life. By moving forward with a strategic rate increase approach, we will be able to plan for substantial capital investment in the electric division infrastructure. This specifically applies to the 4 kV, 12 kV upgrade to our distribution system. But with the increased financial burden, we are still working to maintain competitive rates for our customers. The upgrade to 12 kV will allow us to provide safe, reliable, and cost-effective electric to our customers far into the future. And then with that, I'll take questions from anybody.
Thank you. Any questions for Kevin? Mrs.
Kevin?
Volker?
I'm sorry.
I had a question about thanks for presentation.
Sure.
About the length of time that it's going to take to get us from where we are today to having the entire city at the 12 kV level. I think Mr. Lynch might have said it was going to take 20 years to get us completely converted. Is that correct?
It could, and that's just based on recent delivery times. So prime example would be right now, currently, we have 2 transformers on order, part of this conversion. They are taking about a year and 1 month to get here. So by the time those get here, we'll be working 2 years after that to install the transformers and then start the following year, which is why I'm saying 2 to 3 years, the third year, clicking them over to the 12 kV conversion. So essentially, it could be 2 to 3 years if everything goes great. Now, that's assuming we have no other major projects, no burdens, no Mother Nature disasters. If we can concentrate just on the conversion, which we have the crews where we try to assign 1 to 2 crews only on these projects because it takes so long to get them done, that it's 2 to 3 years, 5 years, so 15 years, if we're lucky, 10 years. So that's where that time frame's coming in, if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
So I was, as you were talking, it occurred to me that we should all go into the transformer business because it sounds like they have more business than they can handle. So we must be, as a city, in a situation where we're competing with utilities all over the country to get this equipment. There's just not enough of it being made.
Well, there's two, well, some of it's competition for that, but there's also the EV charging stations, and there's also raw materials. So really, a lot of it's due to the raw material. They can't get the material to create the core to actually make the transformers.
So it's the raw material
issues.
We need to go into mining. Okay. Okay. So is there a concern that because of the length of time that it's going to take for us to get our municipality to 12 kV, is there a concern that by the time we get there, it'll be obsolete?
I would say no, not in the time frame we're proposing. That doesn't seem to be an issue. The original goal prior to all this 2022 transformer delay and material delay would be to avoid the situation we're in right now, which is years for delivery time. So the original thought was get out of the 4 kV, convert to the 12 kV so we can get ahead of this when the delivery times were 3 to 8 months. Came up with a plan, we did a bond, the world happened, COVID happened, delivery times went crazy. They're not coming down, prices went high, they've kind of plateaued at the prices we're looking at, and then that just adds to the delivery and it adds to the time frame. So that would be, when we first discussed it, that was our goal, is to avoid what we're in right now, is where it takes a year, year and a half, or you can't get the equipment because it's not obsolete so much, it's just you can't get the materials, the manufacturers can't get the materials fast enough to deliver it.
Okay.
So,
All right, thank you.
sure.
So when you order one, do we have to pay in advance?
No. So that's the other thing you have to juggle, is when you have the transformer orders, they're only paid on when they are delivered. So that's the other reason why we're trying to stretch the money out, is if we order it, half might deliver mid-year, half might deliver the following year. So that's why we stretched out to the 2.1 million.
Got it. And then one more question. How long did you say? So when you guys get it in, how long does it take your crews? Do you plan a year? Do you plan 2 years? How
From the time
long?
it gets here,
Yeah.
just depends when it gets here, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So like right now, today, as we're speaking, we're out putting underground pipe in the ground. We're upgrading all the wire. And then when the transformers that are on order get here, we can usually change them out within 2 to 3 weeks. But if they don't come, obviously we're behind the 8 ball. So we're always doing what we can up until the day they get here. So we strategically plan out deliveries, underground infrastructure, or the overhead infrastructure. We'll change poles out, cross arms. And then we know when the transformer delivery is estimated to be here, like they were estimated to be here, all of them by May, and they're not here. So it's, almost June. So we kind of plan on how soon is it going to be here, how much can we get done while we're waiting for it, and when it gets here, put them up as soon as possible.
Mr. Violi?
Changing the subject to one of the sample bills I think that you gave us said that there's a certain rate for under 500 kilowatt hours, and then there's another one for over 500 kilowatt hours
Yes.
88 cents versus 9. What percentage of our citizens are under 500 kilowatt, on average, or on average,
Under
are under the
500?
500? What would be the
Do
percentage?
not
you had
have
to guess?
that one. I have the 1,000. I think we shared the one where we went with.
1,000,
Because
right.
everything we've been using and in the Baker Tilly charts and kind of like state standard is 1,000 kilowatt hours, what everybody uses, because I think it's an easy round number. I believe we were around 84% were less than 1,000 kilowatt.
84% less than 1,000.
Correct. And I think about 14% of our residents were only over 1,000 kilowatts.
And going back to when we met with you before, and it's just for reference, you had said something about the KV, a 4 KV and a 12 KV. Some of them were, you could buy a unit that was both, and now the manufacturer's not even allowing that option, or was something like that, or what am I thinking?
Correct. Yeah, so the 4 KV, the dual transformer. That's what
You
we're
were right,
talking
the dual
about.
transformers,
So dual
right?
rated transformers are the 4 KV to 12 KV. And some of the manufacturers that we order from are not actually going to be building them come 2025. There's other manufacturers, but one specific manufacturer is not.
Not going to build them at all.
Not the way we order them, correct. So we're looking at doing it a little bit differently. We could still possibly get them 4K, 12 kV, but we also order them with tap changers on them, which allows us on the 4 kV system, if you're all the way at the end of the line, your voltage might be lower, we can change the taps in there. So that's kind of the part where they're not looking to build it with the tap changer. So we're trying to negotiate that on, see if it's even necessary right now at the, like we're saying, the 10-year window. By the time we get this changed out, would we need the tap changers, which we will not at the 12 kV rate.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Kevin, thank you again for the information and for the work that you and your staff do on a daily basis. Again, Mishawaka Municipal Utilities and the Electric Department in particular are a success story, and we appreciate the work that you do. I want to talk a little bit more about 4 kV to 12 kV and the transition, because you've done a good job of highlighting it, but I want to make sure I understand what the benefit is for the ratepayer and people like ourselves who are serviced by our electric department. So, one of the, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I took away from your presentation is that 12 kV allows us to deliver electric power to businesses and homes more efficiently and more reliably. Is that correct?
Correct, as efficiently, reliably, and longer distance. So we can reach out to other substations. So currently the downtown area, about north of the river, and then all the way south about Dragoon is all surrounded by 4 kV substations. Also north of the river are 12 kV substations. Once we switch to the 12 kV, the distance, we would actually be able to back up some of our current substations that are on 4 kV by a different substation on the 12 kV system. So once they're all on the same voltage, there's other substations that can actually come and help support the system if need be.
And if I further understood you correctly, to the extent that we still have 4 kV service, and admittedly, we have more of that than we would prefer.
Correct.
But to the extent that we continue to have 4 kV infrastructure, if I understood you correctly, it's becoming more difficult to be able to replace and maintain the 4 kV service as we run into issues with regard to equipment becoming problematic and things of that nature. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is correct.
And then going back to the map that you showed us of the entire city, the first map with the blue and the green. You did a good job at describing it, and I know that on the screen for those viewing remotely, it's a little bit small, but that's just the way that the technology works at times. But you made reference to the fact that the northern part of Mishawaka, the newer development, if you will, in Mishawaka, is predominantly serviced by 12 kV. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And then you have other newer developments throughout the city, where we're at in the central portion of downtown, and some other sprinkled spots throughout Mishawaka that are also serviced by 12 kV. But I really want to talk about the green dots. As I look at your map, that appears to me that the vast majority of our residential neighborhoods and the vast majority of the earliest portions of Mishawaka that were developed before we started to expand outward, it's those early portions of Mishawaka, those residential neighborhoods that are served by the 4 kV service. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And is there anything else you can add on what the downside is to those areas being serviced by 4 kV versus 12 kV? Why would I care if I lived within, and it looks like I do, a home that's serviced by a 4 kV service?
Right. I guess as a resident, you probably shouldn't care. The utility company is the one that should care. Our job is to provide reliable power, and I'd be lying if I said 4 kV is fine, don't worry about it. 30 years from now, it's not going to be a big deal. My job is to look at that future and go, that's going to be a concern for me if I have an outage or if a car runs off the road, hits the transformer, that's 4 kV. I can't get the equipment, I can't get that service turned back on, I didn't do my job. So that's more of a concern for the utility to be giving you the best that we're supposed to be giving you at all times.
But I share that concern. I want power in my house at all times. If I had somebody in my house who had a piece of medical equipment that was serviced electronically,
Right.
I for sure would want that power to be as reliable as it is right now. So
Right.
I appreciate that information. So it's not as much that the next wave of household appliances will only be serviced by 12 kV. It's just that reliability component that is important enough in and of itself
Right.
that we gain if by the move to 12 kV as opposed to 4.
Right, it's what we call the Mishawaka reliability. The Mishawaka reliability is we want to be able to give you an option. If there's something hit, we can switch it to something else. So we just hinder ourselves by not doing the upgrading, making the changes down the road. So the downtown area is the prime example. Most of it, like you said, is residential. It's kind of been steady. Obviously, people put in LED lights and they kind of ride the same 500 kilowatts a month or 800 kilowatt that they're using. It's the downtown areas with these new developments that are coming in with bigger, larger services. The lower kV, the higher the amperage, the less capacity we have. So going to the 12 kV helps supply that and future growth.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Kevin? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Lynch, anything else from your perspective?
I want to thank you. I want to thank you again for your time and for the opportunity to present the information. As one of the things that I would just like to emphasize, and it relates to Mrs. Hazen's question, how much of that 3.75 goes towards purchase power, how much of it is being invested into our infrastructure. Well, 70%, as Jeff explained, is the purchase of power of the cost. We cannot minimize what we need to do in terms of infrastructure improvements. To keep that reliability, sustainability, dependability, and efficiency, we have to invest. And we have to invest at an increasing rate. And that's what the plan does. So it's a comprehensive plan. It's a total plan that includes increased purchase of power, but it also includes major upgrade in infrastructure. I believe that the best way to go is to do it all by rates, based upon everything that we talked about tonight. And with that, I would take further questions or leave it at where it is. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Since we have a few people who have been very patient and sat with us throughout this evening, although I typically don't do this during an informational meeting, if there are any members of the public that also want to speak who are with us, you're welcome to come to the podium and identify yourself and speak. Seeing no one, we also have one, like a talk radio host, we have one caller online who has sat through this evening's proceeding. Call-in user number 1. So call-in user number 1, if you wish to unmute yourself and make some brief comments, we'll afford you that opportunity as well. All right, hearing none, are there any council members who wish to speak? So thank you to everyone for the information that you provided. I do want to, and my apologies, I neglected to piggyback on one of the comments that Councilman Violi made earlier. I appreciate the information that we've received. I appreciate the work of our utilities and the partnership that the council has with the administration regarding the operation of our utilities. I do think that Mr. Violi's point is well taken, and that on a separate path from the matter that's in front of us, it would be high time to have a conversation about revisiting the relationship between this council as the fiscal body for the city and the day-to-day operation of the utilities. Beyond the bond increases that are proposed and come to us, beyond the rate increases, having some role to play in the ongoing fiscal operation of the utility, I think we'd welcome that conversation with our colleagues in the administration. But with that, we will conclude this informational meeting. I want to highlight the fact that we have set, in order to meet that June 1st deadline, that was referenced earlier in tonight's proceeding. We have set a special council meeting to consider these proposed rate increases, and that special council meeting will take place on Thursday, May 30th at 6 p.m. here in these council chambers. At that time, there will be an additional public hearing. There will be an additional opportunity for the public to comment both in favor and against the proposed rate increases. But we appreciate everybody's participation this evening, the information you've shared. And with that, we'll conclude this informational meeting. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.